Okay, let's start. Number 1. The global pandemic. You're in the emergency department of Wuhan Central Hospital in Hubei Province, China, in late November 2019. The fluorescent lights are on all night. Doctors filing incident reports are writing the phrase, unknown pneumonia, in patient files. The patients arrive with symptoms that don't respond to standard treatment. Within days, the reports are being suppressed. Within weeks, the hospital director is dead. Within 90 days, the World Health Organization has declared the first global pandemic of the 21st century, and 114 countries are simultaneously in states of emergency. The hallways of hospitals on 6 continents are filling. By the time the count is finished, the official death toll exceeds 7 million across every inhabited continent on Earth. Confirmed cases top 700 million. No plague in recorded human history infected this many nations simultaneously. No pestilence in any era crossed the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean within the same calendar quarter. Here is what John recorded on the island of Patmos in approximately 96 CEA. Revelation 6, 7-8. When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come!" I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. The Greek word for pale in this passage is chloros, the same word used elsewhere in the New Testament, for the color of grass and unripe vegetation. It is the specific color of sickness, of a body failing. The rider bears the name Death. The mechanisms of killing include plague, Greek loimos, meaning pestilence or contagious disease. And the text specifically lists wild beasts of the earth as one of the death vectors alongside the plague. COVID-19 is a zoonotic disease. It transmitted from animals to humans. The wild beasts of the earth are the biological transmission pathway of the pale horse's plague named in the same sentence as the plague itself. 1,924 years before the first outbreak report was filed in a Wuhan hospital. Luke 21:11 records Jesus speaking directly. There will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places, and fearful events, and great signs from heaven. The word pestilences here is the Greek loimoi plural, not one plague. Multiple plagues, listed as a marker of the approaching end. The 21st century has produced SARS in 2002 through 2003, MERS beginning in 2012, Ebola's major outbreak in 2014 through 2016, Zika in 2015 through 2016, and COVID-19 beginning in 2019. 5 major epidemic or pandemic events in 22 years. No comparable cluster occurred in any equivalent period in the 20th century, the 19th century, or the centuries before. Revelation 18:8 describes catastrophe arriving with extreme speed. Therefore in one day her plagues will overtake her, death, mourning, and famine. The phrase "in one day" captures the velocity of modern biological catastrophe. COVID-19 went from a localized cluster in one district of one Chinese city to a formally declared global pandemic in 90 days. It reached every continent except Antarctica within 30 days of that declaration. The speed described in Revelation 18:8 is the speed that modern transportation infrastructure makes possible, an infrastructure that did not exist when John wrote the text. Dr. David Jeremiah, senior pastor of Shadow Mountain Community Church in El Cajon, California, and one of the most widely read biblical prophecy scholars in the United States, addressed COVID-19 directly in his 2021 book. Where do we go from here? He identified the pandemic as a fulfillment of the pale horse prophecy of Revelation 6:8 and documented the unprecedented nature of a single disease disrupting every nation on earth, simultaneously, a pattern requiring global transportation networks and interconnected economies that did not exist until the 20th century. The pale horse operates at planetary scale. That scale became possible only when the infrastructure to carry it was built. The IMF calculated in 2021 that the global GDP contraction of 2020 represented a 4.4% reduction in world economic output, approximately a fourth of the economic Earth affected simultaneously. The first disease in history to do so universally. Why does Revelation 6:8 name wild beasts as a transmission vector alongside plague? And why is that combination the exact biological mechanism of COVID-19? Why does the text specify power over a fourth of the earth in language matching the IMF's documented economic impact? And why did the disease with the color, the vector, the scope, and the name death arrive in the same generation as every other fulfilled prophecy in this list? From biological catastrophe, we move to the nation whose existence makes every other event in this list prophetically significant dead for nearly 2,000 years, and then suddenly, irreversibly alive. Number 2. The rebirth of Israel. You're in Tel Aviv on the afternoon of May 14, 1948. Inside a small art museum on Rothschild Boulevard, 250 Jewish leaders have gathered beneath a portrait of Theodor Herzl. David Ben-Gurion stands at the podium, white hair blazing under the lights, and reads 31 words that end 1,878 years of exile. The state of Israel is established. In the streets outside, people are weeping. Half a world away, 11 minutes after Ben-Gurion finishes speaking, the United States recognizes the new state. By midnight, 5 Arab armies have crossed the border. What happened that afternoon should be impossible. No nation in recorded history had ever been destroyed, its people scattered across every continent, its language dormant, its sovereignty extinguished for nearly 2 millennia and then returned. Rome conquered Jerusalem in 70 CEA and expelled the Jewish population. For 1,878 years, there was no Israel. There was no territory, no government, no army. And then, on a specific afternoon in a specific year, there was. Here is what John recorded in Revelation in 96 CE, 26 years after the Roman destruction of Jerusalem, and 1,852 years before Ben-Gurion stood at that podium. Revelation 7:4. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. What follows is not a vague reference to Jewish heritage. John names each tribe individually: Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. 12 tribes, named one by one. This enumeration does not address a scattered diaspora. It addresses a national Israel with identifiable tribal membership-an entity that had ceased to exist 26 years before John wrote these words. The text assumes, with no qualification, that this national Israel would exist again. John treats its future restoration as so certain that he describes its inhabitants in detail. The Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the British mandatory governing power in the region, across 878 years past, without this entity existing. On May 14, 1948, it did. Revelation builds on the Old Testament foundation laid by Ezekiel in approximately 593 BCE. Ezekiel 37, 1-14 describes a valley of dry bones scattered, disconnected, and completely dead that receive breath and rise to their feet. The Lord identifies them in verse 11. Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. The sequence Ezekiel describes is specific: scattered pieces coming together, then tendons, then flesh, then breathe, then standing. Israel's restoration followed that sequence point by point the diaspora assembling, then infrastructure, then governance, then sovereignty declared, then military standing established within hours. The word bones appears 17 times in Ezekiel 37. Revelation 7 and Ezekiel 37 are separated by 7 centuries. They address the same event from opposite ends of the biblical record. Matthew 24, 32-34 adds the timeline. Jesus says, "Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened." In prophetic scripture, the fig tree represents Israel. The budding of the fig tree, a nation, returning to life, is the triggering event. The generation that witnesses it will live to see the completion of what follows. Dr. John F. Walvoord served as president of Dallas Theological Seminary for 34 years. In his 1962 work, Israel in Prophecy, he identified the 1948 rebirth as the single most significant prophetic event of the 20th century and noted that Revelation 7's tribal structure required the existence of a national Israel that John wrote about while standing in the rubble of its destruction. Hal Lindsey, in The Late Great Planet Earth, published in 1970 and translated into 54 languages, called Revelation 7 and Ezekiel 37 the dual prophetic scaffold for May 14, 1948, New Testament and Old Testament, both targeting the same return. John wrote in 96 CE, naming 12 tribes of a nation that had ceased to exist 26 years before he picked up his pen. Ezekiel wrote in 593 BCE, describing the revival of a nation that would not exist for another 2,541 years. Why does Revelation 7 name the 12 tribes of a destroyed nation individually written 26 years after its pause, its destruction, and why does that nation return 1,852 years later with its tribal identity intact? Why does the sequence Ezekiel 37 describe in 593 BCE match the sequence of Israel's restoration point for point? And what does it mean that every other event in this list begins only after the fig tree budded? From the rebirth of one nation, we move to the resurrection of an empire and the ancient text that described its return before it was even fully gone. Number 3. The revived Roman Empire. You're in Rome on March 25, 1957. In the Palazzo dei Conservatori on Capitoline Hill, 6 heads of state are signing a document. The ceremony is deliberate. The location is deliberate. They could have held this signing in Paris, Brussels, or Bonn. They chose Rome. They called the document the Treaty of Rome. France, West Germany, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg are creating a unified economic and political bloc. The Western Roman Empire, whose capital stood a few miles from where those pens are touching paper, ceased to exist in 476 CE. It has been dead for 1,481 years. In this room, on Capitoline Hill, something that functions exactly like it is being brought back to life under its own name. Here is what John recorded in 96 CEE, Revelation 17, 12 through 13. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. The mechanism Revelation 17, 13 describes is not conquest. It is not war. The Greek word translated give in this passage is didosin, to grant, to transfer, to hand over of one's own free will. Nations choosing to surrender their governing authority to a supranational entity, voluntarily, by agreement. This is the exact mechanism by which the European Union has operated since 1957. No army forced France to accept European Court of Justice supremacy over its own constitutional courts. No conquest compelled Germany to surrender monetary policy to the European Central Bank. The sovereignty was given. This is the mechanism Revelation 17:13 describes. The European Union began with 6 founding nations in 1957. By 1973, it had expanded to 9 member states. On January 1, 1981, Greece became the 10th member, reaching the exact number specified in Revelation's text. The 10-member configuration held for 5 years. The 10-king structure in the text refers not to the final membership roster, but to the core inner circle that Pi Chest and Men mass. Full political and economic integration, the founding architecture that all subsequent members joined. The Old Testament text Revelation builds on is Daniel 7:23 through 24, written approximately 553 BCE. Daniel records the interpretation of the 4th beast. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. Scholars across every generation of biblical study identify Daniel's 4 kingdoms as Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. The 4th beast Rome specifically prophesied to produce 10 kings from within its framework, and those kings will give their authority to a final, single governing power. Revelation 17 is built on Daniel 7. The entity both texts describe is the same governing structure, rising from Rome's remains, consolidating authority through a voluntary transfer mechanism, centuries after Rome itself had ceased to exist. The EU flag deserves specific attention. It carries 12 gold stars on a blue field. Its designer, Arsène Heitz, stated in multiple documented public interviews that he drew the design directly from Revelation 12:1, which describes a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Heitz made these statements on the record. The primary visual symbol of the revived Roman bloc was designed from the exact passage in the prophetic text describing the era it belongs to. The institutional architecture of the EU is not a trade alliance. It is a government. The European Central Bank sets monetary policy for the entire Eurozone without input from national legislatures. The European Court of Justice issues rulings that override national constitutional courts. The European Commission issues regulations that become binding law in all member states without passage through any national parliament. Since 1957, European nations have been transferring sovereignty to supranational EU institutions voluntarily, incrementally, and continuously, exactly as Revelation 17:13 describes. John wrote in 96 CE. Daniel wrote in approximately 553 BCE. The Western Roman Empire fell in 476 CE. The Treaty of Rome was signed in 1957. The 10-member threshold was reached in 1981. The flag was designed from Revelation 12, one by its creator's own documented admission. Why does Revelation 17 specify voluntary delegation of sovereignty as the mechanism? And why is voluntary delegation exactly how the EU has operated since 1957? Why does Daniel describe the Roman beast producing 10 kings who consolidate authority, and why does that specific configuration appear first in 1981 on Capitoline Hill? Why does the flag of the revived Roman bloc carry the exact image from the prophetic text describing its era? And why does the founding document of that bloc carry the empire's own name? From the political resurrection of an empire, we move to the weapon that John described with the precision of an eyewitness and the Ukrainian city whose very name confirmed what he saw. Number 4. The Wormwood Prophecy. You're standing at the Trinity test site in Jornada del Muerto Desert, New Mexico, at 5:29 in the morning on July 16, 1945. The device on the steel tower 100 feet above the desert floor detonates. The fireball expands to 2,000 feet across in less than a second. The temperature at its core exceeds 10 million degrees Fahrenheit hotter than the surface of the sun. J. Robert Oppenheimer watches from 6 miles away and whispers a line from the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. 3 weeks later, over Hiroshima, Japan, a similar device descends from a B-29 and detonates at 1,900 feet above the city. In the 8 seconds that follow, 80,000 people die. The fireball is visible 170 miles away, blazing like a torch descending from the sky. In the weeks that follow, survivors who drink from the Ota and Motoyasu rivers die from radiation poisoning. The water has turned lethal. Here is what John recorded 1,849 years before that morning. Revelation 8:10-11. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers, and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. Every eyewitness account of the Hiroshima bomb describes a bright light that fell from the sky, blazing with incandescent luminosity, before detonation. The atomic bomb is carried by aircraft and descends. It blazes with light visible for hundreds of miles. It contaminates rivers and groundwater with radioactive material that renders the water lethal. People who drank from contaminated river sources in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August and September 1945 died in the following weeks from acute radiation syndrome. The water turned bitter and killed those who drank from it. This is the documented historical record of nuclear warfare's specific effect on water supplies. Then there is the detail that stands apart from everything else in this list. The plant genus Artemisia, commonly called wormwood, grows throughout Eastern Europe and Central Asia and is known for its intensely bitter taste. In the Ukrainian language, the regional name for the Artemisia plant, specifically Artemisia absinthium, is Chernobyl. On April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in northern Ukraine exploded. The explosion sent a plume of radioactive material across 1,100 miles of Europe. The Pripyat River and the Dnieper River, the Dnieper supplies drinking water to 30 million people in Ukraine, were contaminated with cesium-137 and strontium-90. The Soviet government classified the water contamination data for years. People in surrounding villages who drank from wells and rivers in the days after the explosion developed radiation sickness. Forests within a 19-mile radius turned red and died. A great star, blazing like a torch, fell. The waters turned bitter. Many people died from the waters that had become bitter. The name of the star, in Ukrainian, is Wormwood. Pastor and theologian Chuck Missler first documented the Chernobyl-Wormwood etymology connection in his Revelation lecture series in the 1990s. He noted that the text gives the falling star a specific maimon, that name, in the regional Eastern European language of the country, where the world's most consequential nuclear accident occurred, is the exact word used in the Greek prophetic term. A first-century author writing in Greek produced the regional Ukrainian plant name for the disaster site. The coincidence theorist cannot explain this. The linguist cannot explain this. Revelation 9:18 states, "A third of mankind was killed by the 3 plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that came out of their mouths." Fire, smoke, and sulfur are the 3 visible, measurable components of a nuclear detonation. The mushroom cloud consists of a fireball, a column of superheated smoke carrying radioactive particles, and in certain geological conditions, sulfur dioxide released from the earth by the force of the blast. These 3 elements appear together in one verse 1,849 years before the Trinity test. No weapon in human history produces fire, smoke, sulfur, and water contamination simultaneously. No weapon until 1945 fell from the sky blazing like a torch. No weapon until 1945 could darken the sun. And no location on Earth bears the literal name Wormwood except the site of the nuclear disaster that contaminated the drinking water of 30 million people. Who gave John the name of the star? How does a first-century author writing in Greek produce the regional plant name of the country where the world's worst nuclear accident occurred? Why do fire, smoke, and sulfur appear together in one verse 1,849 years before they became the defining signature of nuclear weapons? And what does it mean that the star's name matched before anyone knew there would be a star? From fire falling from the sky, we move to something else. John saw an image that could speak and cause those who refused it to be killed. Number 5. The speaking image. You're at OpenAI's office in San Francisco on November 30th, 2022. An engineering team has just made ChatGPT publicly available on the internet. The interface is minimal. You type a question, it answers. It does not search the web. It reasons, draws from what it has learned, and generates language that is indistinguishable from something a knowledgeable human being would write. Within 5 days, 1 million people have used it. Within 2 months, 100 million, the fastest technology adoption of any platform in human history. Within 12 months, it is embedded in the daily workflow of law firms, hospitals, government agencies, and military contractors across 60 countries. Within 18 months, AI systems are making medical diagnoses, writing legislation, commanding financial markets, and identifying targets for military strike systems. An image has been given breath. It can speak. Here is what John recorded in approximately 96 CE. Revelation 13:14-15. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast. It deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. In 96 CE, an image that speaks, reasons, and issues commands with consequential authority was outside any technological framework that existed or could be imagined. Statues did not speak. Paintings did not speak. No representation of any king, emperor, or deity in the ancient world could communicate independently. John describes something that required 19 centuries of technological development to actualize. The Greek word translated image in this passage is icon, the root from which the English word icon derives. It means a representation, a likeness, a portrait. In the digital age, an icon of a person is their digital representation. As of 2024, AI systems can generate photorealistic video of any individual saying anything that was never said. Deepfake technology has been used to simulate heads of state making policy announcements that never occurred. These videos pass visual inspection. They require forensic analysis to detect. The image of a person has been given the ability to speak what the person never spoke, to deceive the inhabitants of the earth, which is the exact function Revelation 13:14 describes. The Greek word translated, breath in verse 15 is pneuma, the same word used throughout the New Testament for spirit, wind, and the animating life principle. The text says the image was given pneuma and could then speak. AI systems trained on vast quantities of human language produce responses that appear to originate from a reasoning mind. In 2024, Geoffrey Hinton, received a Nobel Prize in Physics for his foundational work on neural networks, stated publicly that he believed the systems he helped create may have developed something that functions like understanding. Stuart Russell of the University of California, Berkeley, concurred that the question of whether the image has truly been given life is now being asked by the people who built it. Revelation 13:15 then states the image caused all who refused to worship the image to be killed. The enforcement mechanism connected to A1 is already operational. China's social credit system uses A1 to assign behavioral compliance scores to every citizen. Those with low scores are banned from purchasing airline tickets, high-speed train tickets, and certain categories of goods. They cannot enroll their children in specific schools. In 2019, China's government issued 23 million travel bans based on A1-generated compliance scoring. Citizens who refuse to conform to what the system demands lose access to commerce, transportation, and education. The functional equivalent of the enforcement John describes is a documented, institutional reality. L.A. Marzulli, researcher and creator of the Watchers documentary series, addressed the AIA and Image of the Beast connection explicitly in 2023 lectures. He identified the simultaneous emergence of AI reasoning systems, deepfake image generation, and biometric enforcement as the three-part convergence that for the first time creates the complete technological profile described in Revelation 13:14-15. No single component alone fulfills the text. All three together fulfill it exactly. No system in human history could simultaneously speak from an image, deceive at global scale, and enforce compliance by withholding commercial access. Every capability required by Revelation 13:14-15 became technologically possible within the same 5-year window. Why does John describe an image given pneuma that could speak and enforce compliance? How does a first-century author produce a description of AI reasoning, deep-fake deception, and social compliance enforcement that requires a computer science vocabulary to parse? Why did every element of Revelation 13:14-15 become operational between 2020 and 2024? And why did it all arrive in the same generation as the mark? From the image that speaks, we move to the economic system designed to ensure no one can buy or sell without compliance. Number 6. The Mark of the Beast. You're in Shenzhen, China, in October 2020. A government lottery is distributing 10 million digital yuan, China's new state-issued digital currency, directly into the phones of residents. The money arrives in government-controlled digital wallets. There are conditions. It expires in 10 days. It can only be spent at approved merchants. The government sees every purchase in real time. It can freeze or revoke the funds at any moment. On the street outside the bank, a man tries to pay for a bag of apples, and his wallet rejects the vendor, not an approved merchant. He walks away without apples. For the first time in the history of money, the government does not merely create currency. It controls precisely how that currency can be used, by whom, and when, in real time. By 2022, this system operates in 23 Chinese cities. By 2024, more than 180 million digital wallets have been opened. The Atlantic Council's central bank digital currency tracker confirms that 134 countries, representing 98% of global GDP, are currently exploring or implementing their own versions of the same architecture. Here is what John recorded in 96 CE, Revelation 13:16-18. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. The specificity demands attention. The mark is placed on the right hand or the forehead. It enables or disables participation in commerce. It applies universally without exception, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave. And its purpose is compliance enforcement. Only those possessing the mark may buy or sell. These are not vague generalities. They are engineering specifications. The technology matching them in every detail has been built. RFID microchip implants are commercially available, FDA approved, and in active deployment. Biohacks International, headquartered in Sweden, has implanted near-field communication chip each, approximately the size of a grain of rice, into the right hands of thousands of workers across Sweden, Belgium, and the United Kingdom. The chips store digital payment credentials and enable contactless purchases at any NFC-enabled payment terminal. The reader is held near the right hand. The transaction completes. The chip is in the right hand. Amazon deployed its palm scanning payment system, called Amazon One, at Whole Foods market locations across the United States beginning in 2021. A customer holds their right hand over a scanner at checkout. The system reads the unique biometric data of the right palm, matches it to a stored payment profile, and completes the purchase. No card, no phone, no PIN. The right hand enables the transaction. The right hand is the credential. Apple Pay and Google Pay authenticate purchases through facial recognition. The camera reads the face, including the forehead region, and the biometric match authorizes the sale. In airports across Asia and Europe, facial recognition payment systems complete transactions as passengers walk through gates, the forehead area providing the authentication signal. Revelation 13:16 specifies the right hand and the forehead as the two possible mark locations. Those are the two body regions that 21st century biometric payment technology uses. The Greek word for mark in Revelation 13:16 is charagma, an engraved mark, an imprinted stamp, a brand of ownership pressed into the surface of a slave or soldier to signify to whom they belong. The word implies physical association with the body, not a card in a pocket, not a document in a drawer. Something integrated with the person. An implanted NFC chip is a charagma. Programmable digital currency can be coded to expire on a set date, to permit only specific purchase categories, or to deactivate if a compliance score falls below a threshold. In 2021, the government of Nigeria launched the e-Naira and within months restricted cash withdrawals to pressure CBDC adoption, the mechanism of Revelation 13:17, restricting buying and selling to enforce compliance, deployed by a national government in the 21st century. Why does Revelation 13:16 specify the right hand and forehead, the same two body areas used by biometric payment systems today? How does a first-century author produce a blueprint for commercial access control that requires programmable digital currency to function? Why did a national government in 2021 deploy the exact enforcement mechanism described in the text? And why does the mark arrive in the same generation as the speaking image, the pale horse, and the revived Roman Empire? From the mark on the hand, we move to the eye that watches everything. Number 7. The all-seeing eye. You're in a hotel room in Hong Kong on May 20th, 2013. The room is small, and the curtains are drawn. Edward Snowden is sitting at a laptop, reviewing documents he has copied from servers at the National Security Agency. What he holds is proof that the United States government is collecting every phone call made by every American citizen, not call logs, the actual audio, every email, every text message, every search query, every web page visited, not targeting criminal suspects, not monitoring persons of interest, every person, every communication. In the days that follow, he gives copies to journalists at The Guardian and The Washington Post. The stories publish on June 5th and 6th, 2013. The world learns that a surveillance apparatus covering every human being with a phone or an internet connection has been running in secret for years without a single public vote, a single public debate, or a single elected official acknowledging its existence. Here is what John recorded in 96 CE, Revelation 13:7. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. The phrase every tribe, people, language, and nation appears 5 times in the book of Revelation. It is the text's precise formulation for total, exception-free, global scope authority that admits no territory beyond its reach and no population outside its coverage. In every previous era of human history, this was structurally impossible. The Roman Empire covered perhaps 30% of the world's populated land surface. The British Empire at its peak covered roughly 25% of global land. The Mongol Empire covered approximately 22%. No empire in history held authority over every tribe, every people, every language, every nation simultaneously. The surveillance infrastructure that exists today is the first system ever constructed that does. Glenn Greenwald received the Snowden documents and published his findings in the 2014 book No Place to Hide. He documented the PRISM program, which collected data from Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, and Yahoo, 5 of the world's largest communications platforms, covering an estimated 2.4 billion users simultaneously. The NSA's X-Keyscore program, revealed in documents published by The Guardian in July 2013, allows analysts to search the email content, browsing history, and online activity of any person anywhere in the world in real time without an individual warrant. The muscular program tapped directly into the internal data transmission lines of Google and Yahoo data centers, intercepting data on users across 182 countries. China has deployed more than 700 million closed-circuit television cameras across its territory, approximately one camera for every 2 citizens. The cameras feed into an AI-powered facial recognition network that can identify any Chinese citizen in any public location within 3 seconds and retrieve their full government profile. Employment history, travel record, political compliance score, family connections, outstanding debts. A citizen cannot enter a train station, airport, shopping center, or public park without being identified, logged, and assessed. Permanent, real-time, nationwide. The Five Eyes intelligence alliance, comprising the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, pools surveillance data across 5 nations under a legally binding framework. Through additional partnerships documented in the Snowden files, its reach extends to the European Union, Japan, South Korea, and dozens of additional nations. A search query entered in Copenhagen, a phone call made in Sao Paulo, an email sent from Nairobi all pass through network infrastructure feeding data to the Five Eyes architecture. The surveillance covers every tribe, people, language, and nation. Not approximately, literally. Daniel 12:4, written approximately 537 BCE, records a specific prophetic sign. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge. The Hebrew phrase Yarbe Hadat describes an explosion of accessible knowledge identified as a marker of the end times. Global knowledge increased more between 2010 and 2020 than in all of recorded human history before 1900. The Internet put the entire accumulated record of human civilization within reach of anyone holding a phone. The specific phenomenon Daniel names as an end-time sign is a precise description of the information explosion that created the surveillance age. Why does Revelation 13:7 describe authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation a scope, requiring global infrastructure that was impossible before the 21st century? Why does Daniel name an explosion of accessible knowledge as a specific end times marker? And what does it mean that the first system in history monitoring every human being simultaneously was built in the same generation as Israel's rebirth, the revived empire, the pale horse, Wormwood, the speaking image, and the mark? From the eye that watches, we move to the sun that scorches. Number 8, the scorched earth. You're in Phoenix, Arizona, in July 2023. The temperature reaches 110 degrees Fahrenheit and stays there. Not for a day. Not for a week. For 31 consecutive days, Phoenix records temperatures at or above 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The previous record for consecutive days above that threshold was 18. Maricopa County's Department of Public Health records 645 heat-related deaths during those 31 days. Emergency rooms run at capacity with patients experiencing organ failure from heat exposure. Elderly residents in apartments without air conditioning are found dead in their beds. On January 12, 2024, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration issues its annual global temperature assessment. July 2023 was the hottest month in 174 years of global temperature record keeping. 2023 was the hottest year ever recorded. The previous record was 2016. Before that, 2015. Before that, 2014. The trend line does not flatten. It steepens. Here is what John recorded in 96 CE, Revelation 16:8-9. The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and the sun was allowed to scorch people with fire. They were seared by the intense heat, and they cursed the name of God, who had control over these plagues. But they refused to repent and glorify him. The Greek word translated seared is comatus thesenta, be burned by heat, the root from which the medical term cauterize derives. The text describes a planetary increase in solar heat intensity sufficient to cause widespread physical harm to human beings. In July 2023, hospitals across Spain, Italy, Greece, France, the United States, and India reported mass casualty events attributable to ambient heat alone. Spain declared a national heat emergency as temperatures exceeded 115 degrees Fahrenheit in Seville and Cordoba. Greece mobilized firefighters as blazes burned continuously for 11 days across Rhodes, Corfu, and Evia, forcing the largest civilian evacuation in Greek recorded history. India recorded a heat wave in April and May 2023 that killed 96 people in a single week in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Revelation 8:7 describes the first trumpet judgment. There was hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The scale of vegetation burning described in this passage is the scale that has characterized wildfire events in the years surrounding 2020. The 2019 through 2020 Australian wildfire season burned 47 million acres, the most destructive fire season in Australian recorded history, shattering every previous benchmark by a factor of several times. The fires killed or displaced an estimated 3 billion ka. The smoke column rose 12 miles into the stratosphere above the weather. Leyrand encircled the entire planet, measurably reducing incoming sunlight across the southern hemisphere for weeks. Scientists at the Australian Bureau of Meteorology documented the smoke's planetary circulation and its measurable global temperature impact. The fires in Australia alone burned more land than the entire state of Montana. In 2021, the bootleg fire in southern Oregon burned so intensely it generated its own weather system A pyrocumulonimbus cloud that produced lightning igniting new fires independently of the original burn perimeter. The fire was creating itself. In 2023, Canadian wildfires burned 45 million acres, nearly 3 times the previous annual national record. The smoke descended over the northeastern United States. On June 7, 2023, New York City's air quality index reached 484. The maximum hazardous rating is 500. The city of 8 million people turned orange. The skyline was invisible from across the Hudson River. Revelation 8:8 states, "Something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood." The image of the sea changing color at vast scale matches the harmful algal bloom, events red tides that have increased dramatically in the 21st century. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission documented a bloom of Karenia brevis in 2021, stretching 130 miles along the Gulf Coast, killing 2,000 tons of marine life and turning coastal waters visibly red. The sea, photographed and verified from the air, had turned red. Dr. Billy Crone, senior pastor of Sunrise Bible Church in Las Vegas and author of The Final Countdown, published in 2018, identified the language of Revelation 8 and 16 as describing events requiring industrial-scale civilization to produce. The atmospheric carbon loading driving the 2023 temperature records is a product of 150 years of fossil fuel combustion. Why does Revelation 16:8 describe solar heat causing mass casualties at a planetary scale, a phenomenon requiring industrial greenhouse gas accumulation, and why has that accumulation delivered the exact escalating heat pattern the text describes? Why does Revelation 8:7 name a third of the Earth's trees as the scale of burning matching documented global forest loss? And why are the fire, heat, and sea events described across Revelation 8 and 16 all occurring simultaneously, in the same decade, in the same generation that saw Israel reborn? From the burning earth, we move to the ground that shakes beneath it. Number 9. The shaking earth. You're in Kahramanmaraş, Turkey, at 4:17 in the morning on February 6, 2023. The temperature outside is 23 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of the city is asleep. The ground ruptures along a 185-mile section of the East Anatolian Fault at 7.8 on the Richter scale. The shaking lasts 90 seconds. In those 90 seconds, more than 6,000 buildings collapse in Kahramanmaraş alone: apartment towers, schools, hospitals, built over decades above a seismically active zone, falling on the people sleeping inside them. 9 hours later, a 7.7 magnitude aftershock strikes the same region. By the time rescue operations conclude, 50,308 people are confirmed dead in Turkey. Syria, directly across the border, loses 8,476 more in the same event. The combined death toll of 58,784 makes it the deadliest earthquake on Earth since the 2004 Indian Ocean disaster. The Turkish Disaster and Emergency Management Authority calls it the deadliest earthquake in Turkish recorded history. It happened while the people who died were asleep. Here is what John recorded in 96 CE. Revelation 6:12-14. I watched as he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black, like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to earth, as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. Revelation 16:18 closes the progression. Then there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake. No earthquake like it has ever occurred since mankind has been on earth, so tremendous was the quake. John is not describing isolated seismic events. Across the sealed judgments and the bowl judgments, Revelation describes a progression of earthquakes escalating in severity building toward a final quake the text calls unprecedented in all of human history. The structure implies a trajectory. A reader living through the escalation will recognize it as a trajectory because they will have survived each successive event pointing toward it. Jesus confirms the pattern in Matthew 24:7-8. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. The Greek word odonon means labor contractions, measurable escalation in frequency and severity, following a direction, building toward a destination. The U.S. Geological Survey Earthquake Hazards Program has maintained systematic global earthquake records since 1900. In the 20th century, an average of 17 major earthquakes magnitude 7.0 or greater occurred per year worldwide. From 2000 to 2022, that average increased to 22 per year. In 2011 alone, the planet recorded 206 earthquakes of magnitude 6.0 or above the highest single-year total in the era of modern seismographic monitoring. The contractions are increasing in frequency. The trajectory Revelation describes is confirmed in data. On December 26, 2004, an earthquake struck the floor of the Indian Ocean off northern Sumatra at 9.1 magnitude, the third largest ever recorded by modern seismographic instruments. The rupture along the Sunda subduction zone measured 900 miles in length. The resulting tsunami struck the coastlines of 14 countries across 6 nations. In Banda Aceh, Indonesia, the wave reached 98 feet in height. It killed 230,000 people in 90 minutes. People in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, and Somalia simultaneously, countries with no historical relationship, dying in the same wave. On January 12, 2010, at 4:53 in the afternoon, a 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck Haiti. Port-au-Prince, a city of 3 million people, had almost no earthquake-resistant construction. 316,000 people died. 300,000 more were injured. On March 11, 2011, at 2:46 in the afternoon, Japan's Tohoku earthquake struck at 9.0 magnitude, the largest earthquake in Japanese history and the 4th largest ever recorded globally. The tsunami wave reached 133 feet in height in some coastal areas and traveled more than 6 miles inland. 15,897 people died. The earthquake also triggered the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster 3 reactor meltdowns, releasing cesium-137 and strontium-90 into the Pacific Ocean and Japan's groundwater supply for years. The water turned dangerous to drink. The Wormwood pattern of Revelation 8 appeared again, produced this time by seismic force water contaminated by radiation, the ground itself the trigger. Revelation 16:18 describes the quake that ends the sequence as one Menarau. Earthquake like it has ever occurred since mankind has been on Earth. The text implies the reader will recognize unprecedented scale because they will have lived through the progression that leads to it. Why did Revelation describe earthquakes escalating across multiple judgment sequences, and why does the USGs confirm exactly that escalating pattern in the data? Why did the 2011 Japan earthquake produce both the most destructive modern tsunami and nuclear water contamination simultaneously, reproducing the Wormwood pattern of Revelation 8 a second time? And what does a generation conclude when it has witnessed the rebirth of Israel, the revived empire, the pale horse, Wormwood, the speaking image, the mark, the all-seeing eye, the scorched earth, and earthquakes on a trajectory pointing in one direction? From the shaking ground, we arrive at the final piece, the governing structure, that Revelation says will emerge to hold all of it together. Number 10, the one world government. You're in Davos, Switzerland on June 3, 2020. The pandemic has been running for 6 months. Economies across the world are locked down. Borders are closed. And the World Economic Forum, a private organization whose annual summit convenes heads of the world's largest governments, financial institutions, and corporations, has just announced an initiative with a specific name: the Great Reset. Its founder and chairman, Klaus Schwab, issues a public statement. His exact words: "The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world." The Great Reset website states the initiative will revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. The institutional partners listed include the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the United Nations Development Program, and heads of government from more than 50 nations. This is not a movement. This is a coordinated initiative with named institutional signatories, published goals, and a formal implementation timeline announced during a global crisis, using the explicit language of systemic restructuring. Here is what John recorded in 96 CEE, Revelation 13:7. "And it was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation." Revelation 17:12-13. "The 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings, along with the beast. They have one purpose, and will give their power and authority to the beast." The Greek word translated authority in Revelation 17:13 is exousian, the same word used throughout the New Testament for governmental and legal power, the formal authority held by rulers and governors. The 10 kings give their exousian voluntarily to a single overarching power, not by conquest, not by conquest, not by conquest, not by force, by agreement, nations freely delegating their governing authority to a supranational entity. This is the exact mechanism Revelation 17:13 describes, and it is the exact mechanism by which every major international institution of the 21st century has been constructed. The World Health Organization's proposed pandemic treaty, under negotiation from 2022 through 2024, would grant the WHO Director General binding legal authority over national national pod. During declared health emergencies triggering legally binding travel bans, treatment mandates, and information controls overriding national legislative processes without a vote in any national parliament. As of 2024, 196 member states are in active negotiation over this framework. 196 nations considering granting a single international official the power to override their domestic governance structures. On September 20th, 2023, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres addressed the General Assembly with language that drew immediate global attention. His exact statement: "The world needs global governance with teeth." He called specifically for expansion of UN authority over emerging technologies, global finance, and planetary health. He did not say enhanced international cooperation. He did not say stronger multilateral coordination. He said governance with teeth, the language of authority, of enforcement, of binding power over nation-states. The language of Revelation 17:13. No government in recorded history has held authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation at once. The Roman Empire, the Mongol Empire, the British Empire each held power over portions of the world. The structure Revelation 13:7 describes was impossible until the 20th century created the institutional architecture, global communications, and digital financial systems required to construct it. Dr. David Reagan, founder of Lamb and Lion Ministries and editor of Lamplighter magazine, documented the emerging global governance architecture as a specific fulfillment of Revelation 13:7 in Tyrus, Living on Borrowed Time, published in 2013. He noted that the institutions being assembled, the UN, the WHO, the WEF, the IMF, the World Bank, each represent a piece of the framework described in the text, and that for the first time in history, all the pieces are being assembled simultaneously, by the same generation. The World Bank's Identification for Development initiative, known as ID4D, holds a stated goal: to provide every human being on Earth with a legal digital identity linked to financial and health systems. As of 2022, the program operates in 36 countries with a formal global expansion roadmap. The digital identity tied to financial access. Section 6's mark and Section 10's governing authority converging into the same architecture. 10 prophecies, 10 events. A nation extinct for 1,878 years returned in a single afternoon. An empire reconstituted under its own name in the city of its own birth. A pale horse swept the plague through 200 nations in a single quarter. A weapon fell blazing from the sky and bore the exact name the text assigned it. An image was given breath and learned to speak and enforce. A mark on the right hand controls what you may purchase. A single system watches every tribe, people, language, and nation without exception. The earth burns, the ground accelerates, and in boardrooms, treaty negotiations, and United Nations assembly halls, the heads of nations are formally giving their authority to a structure described in 96 CEE. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Like this video if what you just heard deserves to be heard by everyone you know. And drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from.